When I was younger, I definitely used to be superstitious. I used to wear like the same socks, eat the same thing. The governing body has been my biggest challenge throughout my career. Personally, I've had sort of my biggest challenge last year when I had to have surgery on my throwing arm. I went to the Olympics, I became an Olympian, and no one can ever take that away from me. You can have surgery, but there's no guarantee you'll then get to the Olympics. And I said, right, I'm leaving it. Quite an extensive surgery. I had about 8 or 9 incisions in my arm.
I am Jordan Rushworth, host of the Athlete Sit Down with Sport Endorse, where we chat to inspiring athletes to hear their unique journey into the world of sports. Sport Endorse are a global leader in connecting brands with the ideal athlete to forge powerful partnerships and increase exposure for both sides alike. With access to over 5,000 athletes across 90 different disciplines, Sport Endorse is your go-to platform to find a perfect athlete fit for your social media campaign, brand ambassador role, or keynote speaking engagement.
Me on today's podcast is Great Britain's #1 shot putter. She made it to the 2021 Olympics in Tokyo, was the first British woman in 36 years to reach the final at the 2019 World Athletics Championships, and achieved all of this while being a custody detention officer. It is the wonderful Sophie McKinna. How are you today, Sophie?
Yeah, I'm really good, thank you. Really pleased.
Good. So tell us about your story and how you originally got into shot put. I read somewhere that your mum actually got you started.
Yeah, it's a bit of a random one, really. My family's always been involved in sport in one way or another, and I was always a really sporty child. I played football for a little while, but my mum told me I had to pick between athletics and football because she couldn't basically get me to both, which was fair enough. And I used to be a sprinter at a decent level. I won county medals and stuff, but I was never going to be super fast. So one day my mum said to me, have a go at the shot put, and I was 12 years old, nearly a teenager. And I said, hey, Mum, that's not cool. I'm not doing it. I'm not interested. And she said, listen, I've paid for it. You have to do it. You have no choice. And I was like, typically grumpy and sort of trudged over to the throwing circle at the county championships. And yeah, I came second, and everyone was like, have you ever done that before? And I said, no, I just literally picked up and chucked it. So obviously that, as a child, when you win something and are successful at something, you want to carry on. And that's really how it started and kind of how it always continued. I hit milestones as a young athlete and thought, this is great. And then, yeah, it kind of spiraled into a realistic career, which was, beyond my wildest dreams when I first started.
Yeah. So it was originally football you started out. Was that your main goal? And then this sort of happened because of your mum, and then you sort of just spiraled from there?
Yeah, I think I always enjoyed team sports. My granddad was a professional footballer and manager for Norwich City, and when I was younger, I used to kind of knock around the training ground when he was working. I think obviously you just follow what you know, and I was always around football and kind of played that when I was younger, and then I did sports days and stuff like that at school, and absolutely loved it, and athletics just really took over my life. And I liked the idea that it was in the summer, not the winter, so I didn't have to go out and in the cold. But I was actually wrong about that because you train all year round, but as a child obviously you don't realise. So yeah, I loved athletics, and it was just the whole atmosphere of athletics. And my dad works for Aviva, and when they sponsored British Athletics, he took me to Diamond Leagues. I got to see all these performances. I saw Usain Bolt run in Crystal Palace, and it was just, it was all that kind of like spiraled and made me love the sport.
So when did you know you could make a career out of shot put? Because I'm sure it wasn't at 12 years old when you first started.
I don't know. I think I'm still trying. No, I think I got my first GB vest when I was 15 years old, my youth GB vest, and then I got a senior GB vest at 17, and that is, quite unusual as a shot putter because it's normally an older person's event. So I think at that point I thought, right, I'm really gonna give this a go. But I think to make a realistic career out of it, obviously you have to start, getting an agent and getting into these bigger competitions and stuff like that, which is really challenging because it's a path you've never walked before. You don't know how to do those things, and I think when I started, those things started to fall into place for me. I thought, right, I can actually do this. This can be my job. I can be quite good at this. So yeah, that's really when it all started. Sort of when I was probably 18, 19, I thought, right, I'm going to make a real push to go to the Olympics and make a career of it and travel and all that kind of stuff. So Yeah, it took a while from when I first started to realise I could do it as a job.
Yeah, so you mentioned getting your GB vest at 17, 18. Obviously, I don't know too much about the athletic side. I've never really been involved in it. But with football, it's about getting scouted. And as it's a team sport, it's not necessarily, well, you do have to win games, you have to be good. But it's more the scouts see something in you. Is that the same with athletics and shot put, or is it purely results-based?
Yeah, obviously athletics is a really measured sport, how fast you run, how far you jump, how far you throw. And basically you have standards that you have to hit to make international teams. And if you hit them standards, you're then obviously selected. If you don't hit the standards, you leave the decisions in the hands of the selectors, which is a little bit harder because then obviously it becomes down to opinion, much like football. So yeah, the best way to do it is throw the distances and just qualify for the events. And as I say, they set standards out every year, for the Olympics, European Championships, and that happens right back to sort of youth athletics. They kind of set it all the way through. So you kind of know what you're aiming for and you know what you've got to work for and you know roughly sort of whereabouts you are.
Okay, so it's a little bit of both. It makes it easier for you if you get through purely on results based, but then at the same time, if you don't maybe get a PB or you're not your best in an event, then you can also get sort of chosen. Okay, so that makes sense. So I also mentioned that you work as a custody detention officer. I don't know if you still do, but you definitely did whilst you were doing some of your previous events. How do you balance your athletic career whilst also having that full-time job?
Yeah, it was really difficult because obviously working in custody was shift work as well. So it was, late nights, night shifts, stuff like that. So it was really, really difficult. And actually, I was working at the time where I was then pushing into that elite level and trying to make my sport my career. So it was really, really difficult to get that balance of being able to get enough training, enough recovery, but obviously still earn money and live, like we all have to. So it was a really, really difficult time. But I think in the end, it actually worked out quite well being shift work because I could work my training around the shifts. Don't get me wrong, I was tired quite a lot of the time and my body was pretty beat up. But, I did adapt and my body did adapt. It took a long while for it to adapt. But in the end, I got into a nice routine. And actually, I found that, being a normal human, for want of a better term, sort of during my custody shifts, actually was a really nice balance because I think as an elite athlete, your mind is always set on, right, performance. What do I need to do next? What am I eating? What am I doing? Whereas when I was working, I couldn't think about performance. I couldn't think about athletics. And it was kind of a nice mental break in a lot of ways, even though I was, obviously at work, it was quite a nice mental break from sort of the high performance pressures of athletics. So in the end, it actually became, sort of a kind of special secret that I went to work and kind of took all those pressures off me. And it allowed me to perform better ultimately.
Oh, so you think it helped you perform better? Because my next question was going to be, do you think your job has affected your athletic career? And obviously that was supposed to be sort of, do you think it's negatively affected your career? But do you then think it's positively affected your career? Like you said, do you think you performed better due to that job?
Yeah, I think so. I think in the end, it gave me, although the tiredness and the fatigue and the lack of recovery was obviously difficult, I make no secrets about that. I do think it kind of took me out of that high pressure performance environment and allowed me to sort of relax into a normal everyday person thing. And that kind of sounds really silly, but when you're in that performance pressure cooker all of the time, you can kind of get in your own head a little bit and sort of, really microanalyze things. Whereas when you're kind of a bit freer and, you've got other things to think about, you're not constantly in that performance headspace and putting pressure on yourself, which can, ultimately be really detrimental to performance. When you have that sort of release and something else to think about, it's actually really nice.
Yeah. That makes sense. So you've mentioned, or we spoke earlier, that you are trying to, we spoke before the podcast that you're trying to get to the Paris Olympics, and we'll speak a little bit about that later, but I just wanted to get a feel for what your current training regime is like. Are you in a sort of training camp or what's sort of happening at the moment?
Yeah, no, unfortunately, I lost my funding last year due to injury through British Athletics, so I haven't had the luxury of being able to do any training camps or warm weather training this year, which has been obviously a bit of a change and a little disappointing. But I'm training really well. my fitness and my strength are through the roof. I'm making some good changes in my throwing at the moment, which I think is really going to help me this season. Throwing is a super technical event. You're always tweaking little bits, and yeah, I'm really positive. I think this is the best I've felt about my throwing, certainly in a good couple of years. I feel really positive about the changes and really positive about where I am physically at the moment. I think, shot putting is a sport you kind of grow into as you get older, because you get that strength level and that understand of the technique and the event. And yeah, I'm just really, really excited. I think I'm probably coming into some of the best form of my life, which is very exciting considering the last 2 years have been a little bit bumpy with injuries and such like.
Yeah, so your funding's unfortunately been taken away. When you had that funding for previous events, how did you get ready for those? Are they different to what you're doing now, or are you trying to sort of mirror that without?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's a lot different. I'm now working full time, which in quite a physical job, which is difficult to then go and train on top of. And obviously I had the luxury of being a full-time athlete and being able to sort of work out my training during the day when I could go, but I don't have that luxury now because I've got to obviously work a normal 9 to 5 for that income, and then I have to train around that. Obviously, holiday wise and stuff, I have to use my holiday to be able to compete and all that stuff, which I didn't have to do before. So warm weather training just wasn't an option because I'd have used too much holiday and then not been able to compete. So yeah, for me, it is a big difference, and the preparation isn't ideal. Don't get me wrong, but again, it takes me out of that pressure cooker. It takes me out of that performance environment, and you have to kind of frame it as a positive. If not, you can be really, really negative about it, and it just doesn't help your performance. But yeah, for me, preparation is different. But my preparation has been different for most championships. It's never been super consistent just because of like funding and jobs and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm just being really positive about it. And like I say, I'm coming into some of the best form of my life. So yeah, I'm excited to see what I can do this year.
Yeah. So those sort of longer term questions, like how do you training camps normally 8 to 10 weeks, maybe, I don't know. On the short term, how do you mentally prepare for a big competition? Say, I don't know, a day before, or a few hours before. What do you sort of do? Are you superstitious at all? Is there a meal that you normally have, or what sort of thing?
So when I was younger, I definitely used to be superstitious. I used to wear like the same socks, eat the same thing, like all that kind of stuff. But, as I've got older, I've realized those things are actually, they don't really, really help. I mean, if that pair of socks goes missing or something, or they get a hole in, what are you going to do? Like, you can't base your performance on a pair of socks or something like that. So, yeah, for me, preparation is pretty relaxed these days. I kind of worked out that I'm actually a better, more consistent performer the more relaxed I am. If I can kind of go into it in a relaxed state, 24 hours the night before, that kind of thing, I then sort of build up towards the competition. I think when I was younger, I was pretty fiery and aggressive, but obviously as you get older, that kind of all calms down. So I think I've learned to develop a competing technique that works for me now in a much calmer fashion, and that expends a lot less energy than it did previously.
Yeah, well, that's good that you can sort of let those superstitious socks go, because I've played, Sunday league football where people turn up with these socks where there's no bottom to them. They're gone. They've worn them for 10 years, and it's just like, yeah, you just need to let that go. But as I said, some people are very superstitious, but yeah. So what has been your biggest challenge as an athlete, do you think, and how did you overcome it?
Honestly, truly, I think the governing body has been my biggest challenge throughout my career. I think, there's been a massive change in leadership the last sort of 5 years or so. It's been very inconsistent. And I think, yeah, just getting support and stuff like that is really difficult. I think, unfortunately, we're kind of still treated as amateurs, even though we're professionals in the sport, and we're not necessarily given the support and the structure we need and the help. So I think, yeah, I think the biggest challenge throughout my career is that, and I'd love to one day be able to, potentially go in there and sort of enforce some change for the better of the athletes, because I think at the moment, the athletes do not come first in a lot of the thought processes, which is a massive shame. So yeah, I think just some funny decisions made by the governing body have probably been my biggest challenge. But personally, I've had sort of my biggest challenge last year when I had to have surgery on my throwing arm. And and come back from that, I think that was super, super hard, because I've never had sort of a big serious injury like that. I've had, niggles and things that lasted 6 weeks or so, but never a surgery. So I think personally that was my biggest challenge.
So you mentioned the sort of the changes that are going on in the athletics community. Do you think that affects GB as a team, not only just in shot put, but is it in athletics as a whole? Do you think we could be winning more medals if, it was more consistent and the funding was there?
Yeah, I think definitely, unfortunately funding a lot of the time, they use a performance funnel and don't use sort of what is on front of them. My granddad used to, have a great quote when people say, on paper, this team should win. He say, yeah, football's played on grass, not paper. And it's the same for athletics. Athletics is done on a track and on the field, performances. And I think, statistics have a place in sport. Of course they do. But I feel like they're relied on too heavily to make big decisions rather than sort of common sense and outside facts sometimes. So yeah, I just think it could be approached in a completely different way. And I also think, again, I understand sports performance is about elite sport and making decisions, but we are actually humans as well, and those decisions affect our lives and our livelihoods ultimately, and it puts a lot of pressure on athletes at the end of every year where their funding's decided it's a really stressful time for everybody, and it's just not very nice. So I think there could be better ways that could be done for sure.
Okay. So you went to the Olympics in Tokyo in 2021, although it was the 2020 Olympics, but it was held in 2021. And we will talk about that more in a second. But I first wanted to discuss reaching the final of the World Athletic Championships in 2019, which was a huge achievement for yourself and Great Britain, as you were the first British woman to do so in 36 years. Do you think that's been your biggest achievement in your career so far?
Yeah, I'd probably say that was one of my biggest achievements. I think, I was in a really good vein of form and I knew I could throw well, but I didn't think it was going to go that well, to be totally honest. I think I went in ranked 30-something in the world and then obviously ended up finishing 12th in the final, which was, a massive leap. So yeah, it was a huge achievement. It was absolutely fantastic, and it was in October as well, which is way after the normal athletic season has finished. So to peak for that and to prepare for that was something completely different as well. So yeah, I would say it's probably my biggest achievement in athletics, and to be able to do that for Great Britain, after so long, there not being a female shot putter for so long was I think that's probably what I'm most proud of.
Okay. Why do you think that you were the first British woman to qualify in 36 years? Is that down to, you've mentioned funding, but is that down to accessibility to the sport from a young age, obviously funding, or is it something else?
I think, unfortunately, if I'm going to be brutally honest, throws are not a event group that are sort of focused on or cared about that much. We aren't, unfortunately, a glamorous event. Throwing is not for the faint-hearted, and I think the money through sponsorship, advertising, funding, etc., is not pumped into that event group, which makes it really hard to sustain a career in throwing. People get to a point when they're throwers and then they find it hard to move past that point, because ultimately life is always going to take over. I think we have had a lot of successful juniors, but then when life kicks in and you have to sort of stand on your own 2 feet and all that kind of stuff, you can't sustain being a thrower because you just don't have the financial support. It's not about a lack of talent in this country or a lack of ability. I just think we're not supported well as an event group, and I think as well the coaching pathway is really poor for throwing. We don't have a good coaching pathway. We've got some great throws coaches in this country, some of which that are reluctant to sort of share their knowledge, but they're getting older now, and once they retire from the sport, it's going to be hard to sort of find that next generation. So I think that's a problem throws are really facing in the UK right now. A lot of the time British throwers are travelling abroad and sort of outsourcing their coaching because we can't coach our own in the UK, which is actually a really sad thought.
So you mentioned earlier that you want to make some changes hopefully in the future. What do you think are the next steps to further shot put in the UK?
I think for me, the first place you start the improvements is definitely the coaching pathway. I think obviously with the right funding, you have to be able to pass that knowledge down, and then the coaches coach the young athletes, and then you can start to create a bit of a performance culture when you have good coaches with good knowledge who create good athletes, you know, who then compete against each other. The sport starts to thrive again, and then there's the dog. And then after that point, it's obviously funding and putting the funding into the sport. When we don't have the funding, it's just impossible to create any sort of structure or want for people to do it. You know, we have a lot of, I don't know if you've heard of the British Milers Club, who have like the night of the 10Ks, which is like a 10K race that is solely dedicated to long distance running. They make a spectacle of it, and there's like beer tents and this big festival. And I think things like that could be done for throwing, and other countries do it. We just are quite poor at it in the UK because there's so many sort of rules and regulations and red tape things that stop us doing it. But I think there's so many different things you could market throwing with, and there's so many different ways you could do it for sure.
And is that, do you think, a next step for you going into coaching possibly in the future?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd like to go into necessarily coaching athletes, but I would certainly want to, you know, be involved in throws in some way and marketing and trying to sort of just improve the general thought process around throws. I think for me that is the most important part.
Okay, so you moved on. I'll move on to the sort of the Olympics, massive spectacle. You qualified for the Tokyo Olympics in 2021. Once again, an amazing achievement. But how did it? It's a very broad question, I guess. But how did it feel to achieve this goal and to go to the Olympics?
Yeah, I think I'd said from quite a young age, you know, I knew I wanted to achieve in sport, but again, I didn't necessarily know what sport at the time. But I desperately wanted to go to the Olympics, and that was once I'd, you know, decided I wanted to be a shot putter. That was all my sort of life's goal was set on. So when I qualified at the World Championships in 2019, it was one of the, you know, best moments of my life to be able to achieve that. And then on the official qualifying day, my parents and my sister were there, and I was able to sort of share that moment with them. And that was, it was just really, really special. I think that, you know, I kind of look back still, and it's hard to put into words, you know, that feeling of achieving something you've worked for your whole life. And it was a very surreal experience when we all went to try on the kit and all of that kind of stuff. And you're walking out of the NEC with like 6 suitcases full of Olympic kit. It was certainly something I'll never forget. And yeah, it was one of the best experiences of my life. I mean, you know, unfortunately it was during COVID, so that there weren't any crowds or anything like that. But regardless, I went to the Olympics. I became an Olympian, and you know, no one can ever take that away from me.
Are you a brand seeking an influencer to enhance trust and visibility with your audience? Or are you an elite athlete eager to feature in advertisements or promote products on social media? We're a unique platform connecting top-tier athletes with brands for impactful partnerships in your area. For brand managers, we simplify dealings with athletes and celebrities. For athletes, we offer opportunities to collaborate with like-minded brands. With a strong global community, Sport Endorse is your gateway to success. www.sportendorse.com, where brands can book a free demo on the platform, while athletes can sign up for free.
So you mentioned it was during COVID. How did that affect your preparation, or there's no fans, obviously, or the experience at the games?
Yeah, I think preparation-wise, it was pretty difficult because we had to take 100 different COVID tests before we were even allowed to get on the plane. And then, unfortunately, I was pinged as a close contact on the plane because they sat a member of the public where they shouldn't have done, who obviously didn't go through the rigorous testing that we did. So that was a pretty frustrating time. I was in quarantine for 14 days in a hotel room. It affected my training preparations a lot because I was only allowed out of my hotel room once a day. So that was pretty difficult. And then obviously I got to compete, but I was under quarantine conditions still, which was really frustrating. So yeah, it wasn't the best experience COVID-wise, but I think had my preparations been better, again, I was in fantastic shape. A couple of days prior to the qualifying competition, I threw a massive PB in training, and I think, you know, that was ready to come out in competition. And then obviously quarantine happened, COVID happened, and it just ended up not ideal preparations. But again, you know, going to the Olympics and being part of that experience was incredible. Unfortunately, obviously, my family couldn't come out as they'd planned because of the COVID rules. So that's why I'm hoping to give them one more Olympics, so they'll be able to actually come and watch, whether it be this one or LA. I'm determined to get to one more.
Is the Olympics different to all the other events you previously participated in? Does it just feel different when you're there?
Yeah, I think, as an athlete, you have to approach it as a normal competition. You have to approach it as, okay, these are the same girls I compete against all year. Like, I'm just going to throw. I'm not going to make a big deal of it. But ultimately, it is the Olympics, and you know that in the back of your head. It's obviously a massive deal, and it does feel different being in that village environment, and, just the build up to it, the attention you get in terms of press and stuff like that is just, it's very different to any other competition you'll experience. So, no matter how much you try and play it down as an athlete to try and not get stressed by it, the Olympics is a very different experience.
What is the atmosphere like in the Olympic Village? Is it friendly, or is it very sort of competitive, heads down, focused?
It's pretty friendly, especially within Team GB. Obviously, we're staying with all the other sports that we wouldn't normally kind of be around. So you have, you talk to other athletes from other sports, and it's pretty friendly. And then we all get pin badges to swap. So every single country has their own pin badges to get you kind of talking to other countries and stuff to try and collect these pin badges, which, is really great because you talk to people from countries you may never have spoken to normally. So it's kind of it's a friendly atmosphere. I think obviously when you go into competition, the gloves come off. But I think, during the village and stuff, ultimately that's where we're living. It's a living environment. Everyone's pretty relaxed. You've got to go do your own thing and chill out. So the village is a pretty relaxed environment, but competition definitely isn't.
So once it's sort of competition day, no pin badges are getting swapped. It's there, focused. Yeah. And you mentioned that you want to get another Olympics in, especially one without COVID. So you got the Paris and the LA. What has the process been like for you trying to get to the Paris Olympics?
Yeah, I think the last 3 years has been pretty tough. After the the Olympics, I went on to break the British indoor record. The English indoor record, which had stood for 30 plus years, and that was absolutely incredible. It's still my PB at the moment. It was a massive throw. It was at the British Championships, and it was an incredible day. But since then, unfortunately, I sustained an injury on my elbow. Well, it was kind of an old injury, but I re-injured it. And unfortunately had to have surgery. And it's been a bit of a battle back ever since, because obviously it's my throwing arm. And as a shot putter, your elbow is kind of imperative to throw in. So, it was pretty difficult. I went through the surgery because I lost feeling in my ring finger and my little finger in my right hand. There was some thought that I may never be able to throw again because the nerve might be too damaged for me to be able to throw. So, it was a really scary time. And as I say, to come back from mentally and to be able to trust that elbow again, to be able to throw at full force, that has taken a lot of time. My legs got exceptionally strong because I was still training, but obviously I couldn't do anything upper body. So my weaknesses became my strengths for sure. It was just a really difficult time. And I think, now I am coming back to competition and stuff. It's been a long road back, and I'm slowly getting there. Whether that be in time for Paris, I can't sit here and say that for sure. But I do know that I definitely want to go to another Olympics. So whether that means training another 4 years, then so be it.
What is the process like to qualify for an Olympic Games? Is it just you have to compete in sort of local competitions, or I don't really know.
So it's changed recently for athletics. So they used to have a qualifying standard. So let's say, for argument's sake, this time it's 1860. So you have to throw 1860 and come top 2 at the British Championships, and you automatically qualify. And that used to be the only way you could go to the Olympics. But they've now brought in a point system similar to tennis. So if you fall in the top 32 in the world on the ranking point system, you can also be considered for selection. So it doesn't mean you're automatically going, but it means you're in a qualifying position. So World Athletics will send out those invites to your national governing body. Your national governing body will then decide whether they want to take you or not. But by being in that top 32 in the world, if you haven't automatically qualified, you open that door to be selected.
Okay, how far away are you from throwing that 1860 at the moment?
I honestly don't think it's that far off. Training is going really, really well. I've got my first competition outdoors this Sunday coming. We'll just have to really see. I don't want to put any pressure on myself, but yeah, I feel in really good shape. Training's going really well. Throwing is really starting to come together for the first time in a long time. I'm starting to get them old feelings back, which, you know, is actually incredible. And it's put a smile on my face that I haven't had for a while when it comes to shot putting. So, yeah, it's exciting. Again, I don't want to make any promises or any big statements because, you know, sport is not a straightforward path. But all I can say is that I feel in really good shape, and I'm ready, hopefully, to return to my previous form.
That's all you can do. As long as you're prepared and you feel in your best shape, then you have no regrets, I guess. So you've mentioned your injury, and I read that I read in 2023 that it was 3 years in the making, your surgery. So does that mean that whilst you competed in the Olympics and the World Championships that you had this injury?
Yeah, so it's going back a few years now, but in early 2020, just before COVID kind of hit, it was the European Indoor Championships in Poland. And a couple of weeks leading up to that, I had, well, it was a few weeks leading up to that. That was a bit of a lie. A few weeks leading up to that, I had some pain in my right elbow. And I kind of, as an athlete, you get aches and pains. You know, you kind of used to being like, oh, that hurts, shaking it off, training it off. That's just how it is. You know, your body's always in a bit of ropey condition. And I kind of thought nothing of it. And I got to the European Championships and I got to the point where I couldn't actually bend my arm, straighten my arm. And I thought, right, I'm going to give it a go. And I did throw. And unfortunately, I was in the best form of my life. I'd thrown 3 indoor PBs and I was probably in with a shout for a medal, had all been well. But yeah, my elbow didn't want to play ball. I had lots of scans, etc., etc. And it turns out I'd actually broken the top of my radial head. I didn't know I had a broken arm, but I had a broken arm. So I was training and competing on this broken arm for probably 8 weeks or more, which is, not ideal. I was in pain. And what happened was essentially fragments of the bone chipped off. They got stuck in the joint capsule, and they said to me, you've got 2 options. You can leave it because it's the Olympics next year, and you moving your elbow will naturally grind down that bone and it'll stop the lock-in and the pain, or you can have surgery, but there's no guarantee you'll then get to the Olympics. And I said, right, I'm leaving it. Because, when there's a 50% chance it'll fix it, but you won't get to the Olympics, that I am playing that game. I was going to the Olympics come hell or high water. So I thought, right, if I have to be in a little bit of pain, I have to be in a little bit of pain. So anyway, it did actually get better. Those things did break down. Those kind of little fragments of bone did break down in my arm. And I had a little bit of pain, every now and then. It wasn't consistent. It was every few months or so. So I wasn't too worried about it. And then, over the last 3 years, it was getting the pain was getting progressively more frequent until I woke up one morning and my ring finger and little finger on my right hand were just completely numb. And I was trying to, pick up a mug and my fingers weren't working properly and stuff. And I was like, okay, now I need to probably go and do something about this. So I got it scanned, and essentially one of those fragments was pressing on my my nerve, which runs down here. And I needed surgery because they thought I'd permanently damaged the nerve. So they went in, cleared up all the joint, fractured the top of my bone again to smooth it off, trimmed up all the messed up cartilage, and then your nerve is meant to run down here, but they moved it, so my nerve runs down there, so it's no longer being pressed on. So it was quite an extensive surgery. I had about 8 or 9 incisions in my arm. And it was a lot. I'd never been under general anaesthetic. I'd never had surgery before. I went down to London to have it done, and it was all very scary, but the surgeon was absolutely fantastic, put me at ease, and I got myself back to full fitness, and I'm back throwing like it never happened.
Wow. So you're back to full fitness now, completely, no pain. That's definitely the right decision.
Yeah, absolutely. I get the odd ache if I, throw too much and overuse it, but it's certainly nowhere near the pain I was in before. It was absolutely horrendous, sort of, take your breath away kind of pain, but it's nothing like that now. It's so much better. And I can throw completely normally, lift completely normally. And, like I say, it's very rare that I get any sort of pain from it now.
So you mentioned that you had this injury during the Olympics, although you said that the elbow had broken down and it wasn't as painful. Do you think that impacted your performance at all at the Olympics?
To be honest, I think the COVID thing was the biggest impact on my performance at the Olympics. The elbow, although, not 100%, wasn't I can't say it's because a year after that I went and broke the English record for a PB. So I can't even say the elbow was an issue at that stage. So yeah, I think the COVID thing was more of a break on my performance at the Olympics. But yeah, the elbow, obviously, I think I probably could have thrown a lot further in those 3 years had I've got it fixed. But it was that. It was that gamble every sports person has to take at some point in their career, whether they go for the surgery or try and limp the injury on to achieve what they want to achieve.
Yeah, I definitely think you made the right choice with if it was me anyway, I would have made the same choice to make sure that I got to the Olympic Games at least once. And now luckily it's back and it's worked. So you have, 2 more opportunities. During your surgery and the recovery, how did you stay motivated and sort of focused? How long was the recovery process?
It was quite long, yeah. It was, so I think they told me I wouldn't be throwing for 3.5 months. I think it was. No, I think they said I wouldn't be training for 3.5 months. And then, I wouldn't be throwing for 6. So I thought, this is going to take so long, but I actually was really patient. I'm not a patient person at all. I don't think any athlete is, we want everything yesterday. And I actually did listen to the physios for a change and done what I was told and done the rehab. And actually, I got back throwing in 3 months, 2 weeks, or 3 months, 2.5 weeks, something like that. So it was a lot quicker than we expected. Obviously, I wasn't throwing any major distances, but I had a shot in my hand and I was releasing it. And to me, that's what mattered because I'd beaten the clock. And I did it. So, but I was in a sling for a good while, for a good 4 or 5 weeks. And then had to go through really extensive rehab to get it moving again. Because obviously when you've been like this, it then kind of gets locked in that position. So I had to do a lot of movement. And to be honest, the initial rehab was the worst part to get it moving again because, you're tentative because you don't know what it's going to feel like. You've still got stitches in. And yeah, just the motivation for me was just, I will be back. I think that was my biggest motivation. I just wanted to be back. And not only that, I wanted a normal working hand. And I think, regardless of anything else, regardless of sport, I wanted to get back to being able to have my hand working again. And that was a massive motivation to complete my rehab and make sure everything was good because, it affects your everyday life, not just shot putting.
Yeah. It wasn't purely motivated by getting back and getting to the next Olympics. It was, I guess that makes motivation a lot easier to have when it's not just sport, it's also personal life. So what valuable lessons have you learned throughout your career from your experiences that have also impacted your personal life? Maybe that be the injury or anything else.
I think for me, the biggest lesson I've learned is perseverance. Through a sporting career, you have lots of ups and downs, like injuries or setbacks or qualification setbacks, training setbacks, whatever that may be. I think perseverance is the biggest tool and the biggest thing you'll ever learn. And you can transfer that to your personal life in so many different ways, whether that be, work, relationships, I don't know, like any tough things you may go through, illness. Perseverance is so important. And if you can get your head down and sort of see the light at the end of the tunnel and achieve those steps towards that, I think, that is the biggest thing I've learned. And it took me a long time to learn it. When I was a younger athlete, I was very much like, sort of dragging my heels. But now perseverance is so important for me because there were several points in my career where I was like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I don't, it's too hard. But I persevered. I made the Olympics. I'm a better person for it, a better athlete for it, and all of those things. So yeah, it's very exciting to me that perseverance is, a skill that I can now use in so many different areas of my life.
Do you have any sort of role models or influences in your life or influencers?
Yeah, my granddad is my biggest role model, and that kind of probably sounds a little bit cliche, but obviously he was a professional footballer and manager, and he's always been my sporting role model. And not only that, he is a fantastic person and a fountain of knowledge for me. He'd been there and done that, although different sports, different eras. He was always had my back, always helped me make key decisions in my career, and he's a great person. He's such a gentle and kind person, but at the same time fiercely competitive. And if I can become half the person he is, I'll be very happy.
Is he at every event, sort of every practice, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I would say he's at every event, which he normally is, but he's not coming this Sunday because Norwich are in the playoffs. But,
Priority.
Yeah.
So what expectations do you have for this year? Obviously, you want to get to Paris, but maybe beyond that, what do you want to achieve? Maybe this be more personal as well. Maybe it's not in tune with athletics.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm in a really good place in my life. I'm getting married in the next couple of years, and thank you. Things like that are obviously really, really exciting, and I think that motivates you in your sport and life a lot as well. When you're sort of content in other areas of your life, you're just happy, and everything becomes a hell of a lot easier. So I think for me, my sport and achievements in the next couple of years definitely have to revolve around pushing my way back into the GB team, whether that be this Olympics or the next one, but certainly European Championships, Worlds. And I just want to be back to where I was, back at a performance level that I can be proud of, and one that I know I've worked really hard for. And that's, my biggest goals over the next couple of years. Okay.
What advice can you give to up-and-coming sports people out there wanting to be the best at their sport and perhaps go to the Olympics in the future? Apart from perseverance, obviously.
I was going to say, perseverance and hard work, definitely the biggest one for me. You can never outrun not working hard. Talent is obviously important. You can never sort of downplay that, but hard work can never be beaten. If you're determined and you work hard and you make the sacrifices, you'll be the best version of yourself and the best athlete you can be. And that's the biggest advice. If I could, turn back the time and go back a few years, I definitely would do things differently. As a younger athlete, I'd concentrate on recovery and mobility and things like that. So when I got older, like I am now, I wouldn't be so sore.
Is that what I saw you've been to sort of schools and teaching kids. Is that what you tell the kids when you go to those schools?
Yeah, I go into the schools and, I am a sports person. My primary love in life is sport, but I always say to the kids, listen, if it's maths you're good at, English, history, drama, whatever it may be, just work hard at it. If you've got a passion, if you work hard at it, you can be whatever you want to be. And I think that is the biggest lesson and the biggest message. It doesn't matter what it is, but if you set your mind at something and are absolutely determined, you can achieve great things.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll move on to Sport Endorse's Fast Five, the quick questions. Try and answer them as quickly as you can. It never really happens. You always think about it, but that's completely fine as well. If you could be another athlete, who would you be?
Like a swimmer or maybe a cyclist, like Chris Hoy.
That's a great answer. What is a brand you use that people may be surprised by?
Oh, Crocs.
I have a pair that I love them. Before I got them, I was like, I'm never going to use them. They have this thing around them, stigma. But once I use them, amazing.
Yeah, they're so comfortable.
They are so comfortable. If you were not an athlete, what would you be? Well, custody detention officer, but okay. If you weren't an athlete or a custody detention officer, what would you be?
A police dog trainer.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. What is your favourite movie?
Titanic.
That's a good movie. What is your party trick?
Oh God, I don't know if I can say that on the podcast. No.
What is your second party trick?
I can juggle my. So that's a good one.
You can juggle your shot puts. I was going to play it. I think I've only ever tried shot put once when I was at school, and I picked up it and I was like, oh, this will be fine. Went to throw it and it went about half a meter, and I was like, yeah, well, I won't do that again. So being able to juggle it is very impressive. And obviously, I mentioned this before you hopped on, but we have a question that our last guest left, Vanessa Ruck, which was, if you could go back in time through history and stop one thing from happening, what would it be?
Oh, that's a great question. Probably breaking my elbow. I think if I could avoid that injury, I would have done it. Sportingly, definitely. I'd never have an injury if that's what I could do.
Yeah, but then would you have as much perseverance as you currently have?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Swings and roundabouts.
Yeah. And then obviously, what question would you leave to our next guest?
If you were a dog breed, what would you be?
Okay, and what would your answer be?
Probably a golden retriever.
Golden retriever. I'd probably be like a German Shepherd. I think I've always wanted one. But anyway, yeah. Well, thank you, Sophie, for for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you, and you're an amazing role model for aspiring athletes. I wish you all the best in whatever challenge you have next, whether that be the Olympics or, well, Sunday in competing. And yeah, all of Sophie's links will be in the description, so make sure to go follow her. And until next time, goodbye.
Thank you for watching the Athlete Sit Down, brought to you by Sport Endorse. To book any of our athletes featured on our podcast, contact us via our website, www.sportendorse.com, or via our email, hello@sportendorse.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our upcoming episodes.